I'm looking forward to really hearing about how Morgan is going to approach the problem. So as people kind of shift around, over to you, Morgan.
Great, thanks. Let everyone finish getting in or out. All right, well, I've been involved in 2 companies, and both companies were about getting people, experts like you and I, to do things in the cloud. And we started this in 2000. And first one was called LogoWorks, venture-backed, and we ended up selling that to HP. And then Needle. And the last place I thought I'd probably be talking was a gamification conference. Back when we started this, we didn't even use that term gamification. We were just simply trying to get people, highly educated people, to do creative work and do it remotely. And so I want to start with a story here. So perfect at a gamification summit. I'm a little bit competitive, like you. I just want to win. You know, I'm kind of a bad parent. I'm the one that goes up to their kids and says, "Hey, you know, second place is the first to lose." Stuff like that, right? Wife tells us not helpful, but anyways, that's the way I feel. I'm really competitive. My brother calls me up about 3 or 4 years ago, and he says, "Morgan, I'm going to get I have 3 brothers, so we're going to get all the brothers together, and we're going to do a triathlon." And he's kind of a professional athlete. He doesn't sit at a desk all day like I do, staring at computer screens. And I think, well, okay, I'm going to do the triathlon, but there's got to be some way I can win. And I've seen the Olympics, and I've seen people getting banned for these super suits, right? So anyone out there who does triathlons knows there are some suits that actually can make you swim faster. And I've heard of these things, and so I get online, I want to find one. And I've got a little bit of expendable income. And I think, well, my brother, maybe he doesn't have the best suit. So if I get one of these things, I get a little lighter bike, get one of these suits, maybe I have a shot. So I do what we all do. I go to Google, start searching, start looking through there, all the forums, and I certainly am not going to call up my brother and ask him which one to buy. And so it's going to be my secret advantage in this competition. And I spend like 6 hours. I go to all the forums, I'm reading things, and I finally figure out there's like 3 top brands. I'm like, who wins the Ironman? What does he wear? And eventually I kind of get gun shy and I buy it offline. And I buy everything online. But that thing, I didn't buy it. And that was the actual suit I ended up purchasing, the Orca. Well, the question was, and this is with the aha moment when we started Needle, was how do you get these guys? I knew there were 20, 30 people, just like you and I, sitting around their computers, and maybe they were playing Farmville, maybe they were watching TV, maybe they're doing something, but they had the capacity to interact with me in real time. Why wasn't there a mechanism for them to do that right now, right when I'm shopping? Not some answer that I post and answer me 5 minutes later, 48 hours later, but I need the information right now and I'll make the purchase. It didn't happen. So we started thinking about that, and what we knew from my previous company at LogoWorks was that we had to have a platform that made it really easy to get people, again, like you and I, that have hobbies. All of you have hobbies and passions and interests out there. There are things that you will talk about all day long. There's at least probably one. And how do we get people like us involved in this process online? Well, you got to have this platform, and it's got to be really easy, because if there's hurdles and there's barriers that people have to jump over, they won't. You have to have real work for people to do, and it has to be consistent. So you can't just come on once every 3 or 4 months, and that wouldn't be a stable system for us. And not only that, it wouldn't be attractive to the type of experts that want to talk about this and get involved in selling. And this is why I'm here talking to you about this, and hopefully to share some learnings will be helpful to you, is that to get true experts and people that are passionate about things, you cannot pay these people. You really have to use go after intrinsic motivation and use what a lot of people here are talking about, gamification. So as I mentioned earlier, we were doing this in 2000, 2001, and we were doing it with a company called LogoWorks. Again, I didn't know to call it gamification. We just sat down and logically said, well, how can we get graphic designers that are working on Madison Avenue, the best of the best, ones in agencies here in San Francisco, how do we get those people doing things in their off time? They would love this if they could actually produce and do graphic design and be part of producing really high quality artwork for things they don't normally work on. How do we do that? And like I mentioned earlier, HP bought this company. If you go to LogoWorks now, I don't know, I think some Russian hackers own it. Be careful. But here's what people didn't know we had was this whole designer community. And that designer community had a lot of gaming mechanics built into it. And it was what enabled us to scale and to have hundreds of graphic designers working globally for us. We had a sliding point scale that determined your rank in the system, and I'm going to walk you through that and how we did that. We had variable pay based on that rank. And then a concept that's very important in any type of creative work is peer review, where the people in the system review and help each other get better. And then we have this thing called the project limiter. And that was simply that in any kind of game mechanics, in our world, game time can become, you have burnout. And if we had people doing too much graphic design, or not doing a great job, we had to focus them and start limiting the amount of projects they could do. So I want to introduce a guy that I've actually never met. He doesn't look so happy here, but I know he was happy. He was one of the designers that worked for an ad agency, Euro RSCG, in Poland, in Warsaw. And eventually I think he ended up quitting that job because he was making so much money doing work for LogoWorks. If I go to Poland, I'm sure he'd shake my hand because back then the dollar was worth a lot more, and he was making, I think, at the time, 30, first year maybe did 20, and 30, maybe up to $40,000 a year, which was actually quite a bit there. And we had a system, a mechanism that not only did that, but the game mechanics that I'm going to show you here in a second really enabled him to do what he really wanted to do. And that's exciting for us, both at what we were doing at LogoWorks and then also at Neil today, is we enable people to do really high quality creative work and be a part of something. So one of the things that we did, figured out really early on, is that people do better work simply when they do it when they want. And if you force them to do certain things, you're already at a disadvantage. And so we built a system that was built around the idea that you come in, log in, you could read a creative brief. In this case, let's call it Silver Creek Investments, and say, okay, I've never done a logo or a design project for an investment firm. That sounds really fun, and you could sign up and take it. And that's an important concept in getting quality. We also you would pay via PayPal. So it was electronic, very fast. You pick the work, you do the work, and you got paid immediately. Not in 2 weeks, not in a month. It was immediate. And that's a huge concept in distributed work, is the speed at which you pay and reward people for doing the work. The ranking system that I mentioned earlier was critical to our success and how we made this all work. What we did is, anyone that came into the system started at the base level, entry, and you started with less than 50 points. We didn't care if you did the FedEx logo. We had that designer in our system, and he had to start with start like anybody else, down at the bottom around 20, 30 points, and you had to work your way up. You never had tenure in our system. So you couldn't just do projects, do really well, and then kind of sit back and do poor quality. At any given time, if you stopped producing quality, you would drop in your ranking. And why that mattered was that for each set of concepts you did, your rank at the time when you took that project was how much you got paid. And there's quite a big difference. It usually would take designers an hour, maybe 2, maybe 3, to do a set of concepts. So everyone got paid every single time they did something, and it usually actually worked out pretty good hourly rate, because the winner actually got $50, meaning that the client who saw the work, and back to the concepts you saw earlier, the person who got picked got an extra $50. So this actually worked out really well in terms of money, though most of our designers didn't do it just for that. One thing that was really helpful and critical to our system early on was peer review, as I mentioned earlier. And the community would go through, and they would blindly look at a project they had nothing to do with. And there they would take the concepts that were shown to the customer, and they would rank them. And it was a forced ranking system. So every time, some designer did the best, and some did the worst. And this was critical, because most people, as you know, tend to want to say, oh, everyone did great, no one wants to be the bad guy. In a forced ranking system, someone did the best and someone did the worst. And yes, there were occasionally some things that seemed unfair, but statistically, over time, this was highly accurate. The community knew who did the best work over the long period of time, and it always showed up. And the reason why that also mattered was that you could actually gain 12 points or lose 12 points on every project, just depending on what your peers said. And that was really important, because that obviously went into eventually how much you get paid. So it was all tied in, and that was how we actually made this work. So some of the things we learned about that, if you want to have creative work, and you want people to give you this stuff here, their best, then gamification and some of the things that I'm showing you up here, it's not a nice to have. You absolutely have to have it. People can't give you their best stuff if you don't make it fun and exciting for them. I mentioned earlier that burnout really is the enemy. You have to be careful with that and what you do, because there's only so much, in our case, logos or websites or brochures that people could produce, and at some point the creativity just drops off. And we learned this the hard way. I don't come from a gaming background. All of you are probably laughing that are game designers and know this, but it just didn't occur to us that anything that could be exploited would be exploited in the craziest ways you never thought possible. We had people writing scripts that would take projects. We had people hacking in, trying to add points to their totals. You name it, it was done. I didn't expect it and didn't know that that would happen. So at Needle, what we're doing now is we're helping people sell things online. To give you an example, so we take the best representation or best brand advocate. We put them in front of the customer in real time to help them figure out what to buy. So we get people like Carly, and Carly is a good example because she's sitting at her home. She's been buying Coach handbags for years. She literally owns 40 handbags. I don't know what I'd do if my wife bought 40 handbags, but I'd be concerned. Anyways, Carly loves them, and she's owned them for years, and she knows everything about them. And a brand like Coach would love to get Carly in front of their shoppers. And without a platform to do that, you just can't. But in 60 days, Carly comes online and sells $41,000 worth of handbags. She'll never work in their store. She'll never work in their contact center. So here's how we get someone like Carly and the mechanics that we use to get Carly excited about working for Coach in an online environment. The first thing we do, which is pretty obvious, are leaderboards. Everyone needs to know where they stack up in the community at any given time. And so we take an arbitrary or a time period of 3 hours, roughly, and we say that's a block. We've called it a block of time. And we look and say, well, how did Carly do? We, of course, have the badges. And as we heard plenty this morning, we all know badges are not enough. They're definitely helpful, and people love those, but they're not enough to keep Carly excited. As I mentioned earlier, the way we do scoring is that we build a scorecard, essentially, for every client. And every client has, wants to help determine how these conversations are going to go. And so what you reward gets done. And so some of the things that we typically do for any of our clients, we'll have a satisfaction score. We'll have a response time metric. And we can measure this all in real time on our platform. We know how much sales they do. And we know if they get emails. Any of the activities that marketers or customer support want to do, we can put in the scorecard, create points for it, and Carly will collect these points and then be on top of the leaderboard. That's fun, but the real reason Carly and any of us would probably do something like this isn't because of the money. Now, we actually do pay it typically per chat, some cash component, which might work out to call it $8 to $12 an hour, depending on what you're doing. So there is a cash component to this. But the most important part of the way that we get Carly's and people like you and I doing this is because of the products. So our points have value. And that value translates directly to goods that Carly wants. And when you take points and then get them into something tangible in front of somebody, you have a lot more power. One thing I'll also mention that's really important is we reward the top performers like Carly with more time, more game time, if you will. And it really does become like a game. It becomes fun for these people, and there's a community element involved as well. But as a privilege for being at top of the leaderboard, in this case would be Sarah or Carly, they can come into our scheduler and say, hey, I'm going to be there next week, and I'm going to commit to you that I'm going to be there for 3 hours or 6 hours or whatever they can do. And that's actually worked really well as part of the intrinsic motivation, the reward mechanisms for performing, is simply giving them more outlet to talk about what they want to talk about. So real quick, to summarize, wanted to give you the learning so far. We're only into this couple years, and this will be a long, decade-long business, big global business. But some of the things that are working, as I mentioned earlier, paying a base rate in cash that's good enough. Now, we need to do that because Carly needs to show up and needs to do things somewhat consistently. She's free to come and go as she pleases, but the group as a whole needs to be there somewhat consistently. And so we found that a cash component needs to be there, but just good enough. The products are far more important. I mentioned earlier that using points that have real value and that can be redeemed for products. The leaderboards are nice, but really using the leaderboard to tie into one of the most important privileges. That's what we found is the most important there. And the peer review is also critical. I mentioned it earlier in LogoWorks, and we have them review the actual concepts that were produced. In this case, the conversations or transcripts are reviewed by their peers, and that's an important element in making the community better and making Carly feel like not only am I helping customers figure out what to buy, but I'm helping other people learn things that I know and only I know. Again, if you think about your hobbies and the things that you do, there are things that probably you feel like you only know, and to get to share that with people is important. Spontaneous rewards. These are probably the most important in some ways. The ones that people don't see coming. Maybe some concert tickets or things that we throw in there that just come out of the blue. Hey, you did this, and that was amazing, and we're doing this for you. Some of the things that we've had challenges with. So the lone wolf superstars, I call them. So these are the people that are top of the leaderboard all the time, but don't really want to contribute to the community. They're still helpful to the program overall, but at some point, if someone owns the leaderboard and owns it forever, it becomes frustrating to others, especially if they don't participate in the community or add any other value. I think the talk this morning really emphasized the point that badges just don't get it done, especially not in our type of environment where we're getting creative people, educated people to do things on a consistent basis. They're helpful, but not enough. Cash is definitely detrimental to what we do. It was at LogoWorks and it is at Needle, meaning cash is thrown down as rewards for selling things or making customers happy. Actually is quite negative, and we've proven that over time. And then probably the biggest no-no that we've seen already is if there's any mystery, especially when money and products and points are involved with people, that's a killer. And people need to know if there's a game to be played or something to be won, they absolutely have to know all of the rules and have visibility into how that's being accounted for and how they can win. That's all I had. Thanks. I will shameless plug. We're looking for some game designers, and we have my email's up there. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much. That's Morgan Lynch from Needle.com. Very illuminating. Thank you, Morgan.